Hello. Welcome to Conversations in the Void. I'm your host, Joshua Von Ammon, and today joining me is Eli Walker. Eli Walker graduated with a Bachelor's of Fine Arts from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, whereupon moving to Baltimore, where he received a Master's in Fine Arts in Painting from the Maryland Institute College of Art. Eli has shown in cities such as Chicago, Baltimore, Dallas, D.C., Philly, and internationally in Botswana and Ireland. Thank you for joining us, Eli.
Thank you.
So I want to start this off just to talk about a little bit to your process. You and I are very familiar working together for years, and I want to indulge our audience a little bit into your process as far as the preparation and your present sort of approach to the canvas. Could you speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of craft that goes into it. I mean, I like materials a lot, and I'm very particular about how I make my surface and things like that. But at the same time, I have to weigh in on messing something up. You know, like if it needs spray paint or if it needs something that is going to trip me up later on within the painting. You know, like tape or something like that. I'll put that down so I can make a painting, and then when I bring it back up, it's almost like I booby trap it to where it pushes me further. Something I had picked up from reading about Ed Paschke and how he would invite people over to paint on a painting that he had that was in the studio. Like if he had a party at his house or something like that, he would just let anybody just paint on it. And in that way, he'd had to rework it, and he was constantly moving his practice forward with that, you know, trying to figure out new techniques for it or figuring out new designs on how to go around with it and stuff like that. That really intrigues me. And to this day, I mean, just yesterday, you know, I got a surface that was very nice and clean and pristine, and, you know, I
think
sanded
you're
it.
underscoring that in some small part. I mean, that's something that actually takes, weeks to prepare. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just layer and layer and layer and layer. I mean, something akin to, a classical indirect painting approach that Caravaggio would use, except that you're just preparing a surface. I mean, I only say, reference that with respect to the, amount of like put a surface down, clean it up, put another, and you work, with the gesso, and then you work with oil ground, and, traditionally, like in your practice, I've known you to in the system of layering, also putting down like sort of masking so that like you can remove or almost have this excavation in the surface alone before you even approach it with painting.
Well, I kind of say like the history, like you can see the history of a painting by looking at its sides. And so I like to have the history of the painting from like face value. So you can see the raw canvas and you can see the layers that went through the process of it. And so like it's something as akin to like a dry erase board. I mean, I need it that way because it makes the most amazing marks that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I've always wanted to, I don't know, like just paint on something that was so pristine. And then that way I can just do whatever I want on it. And it's still going to be a good painting,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Certainly. So, well, outside of, I suppose, your particular practice, I mean, you're a major player in the Dallas art scene, orchestrating events, trying to inspire a sort of DIY attitude towards gallery shows, putting together by your own means, and your own sort of collaboration with other artists in the surrounding area, even nationally as well. Can you speak to, like, perhaps some of your goals and motivations behind what you're trying to do?
A lot of it came from Chicago. In Chicago, it was kind of standard practice to, have an alternative space in a way that if you had a studio, if you had a house or anything like that, you just put up work and you invite people over and you have
Mm-hmm.
yourself a exhibition. And coming down to Dallas was kind of taking it further because that sort of practice became so saturated in the history of artists in Chicago and doing that it was kind of like, well, we need to take this, this sort of theory and put it in practice in a different city.
Mm-hmm.
And so we came down to Dallas to, and when I say we, my partner Kelly and I came down to Dallas, and we wanted to interact with the city on that level of like saying that it is okay to do things completely DIY, and it's okay to do things in this structure. So we found some other people that were like-minded, and we joined up that way, and we've been just doing it.
Mm-hmm. And that was to put names on this whole project. I mean, that was the first creation of this shortly after moving here. I think 4 months after moving to Dallas. This time last winter or late fall, you formed Homeland Security, which I believe was your own sort of.
Yeah, it was a studio that we had out in West Dallas, and we called it Homeland Security because we found out that there actually was a Homeland Security, what's it called, like an outpost that was there, and we thought that was really interesting because it was this really, it looked almost exactly the same as our studio did. It was just sort of a barn type of a thing, just like sheet metal and stuff like that, completely nondescript. And when somebody pointed out that it was a Homeland Security base, it just popped like, we're just going to call our studio.
And would you embrace any particular insinuation of protecting the homeland, on a more like...
Well, when we moved to the Cedars eventually, and that was really when we got the opportunity to do what it was that we were talking about in Chicago, about opening up our house as a gallery. And it just seemed more appropriate to call our home Homeland Security in that way. So we moved that over there. So the studio is not Homeland Security anymore, but our house is now.
And the most recent show you put on in this house, well, in fact, the first show that was put on in this house, Brass Tacks. That was a combination of artwork from the artists existing in, well, our collective, I suppose.
Yeah,
being a member myself.
I want to say like the founding members of S.C.A.B. That's the 8 of us that were, originally got together, and we still work really tightly. But I like the idea of it being founding because I think it has a potential to bring on more members, more and more. But,
and would you say that maybe you have like a goal on how this project? I mean, you have this suggestion that has the opportunity to grow, to incorporate. What do you really see that potentially becoming, or what do you want to see it becoming?
It's more like a example. It's more of an example to other people to do the same thing in the city. We opened it up during studio tours that they had all day. It was from like noon to, I don't know, midnight really. And the main question that we got, people that would stand in the door and they would ask, "Is it okay if we come in?" I'm like, yes. So we had to do that almost every time.
Because you're working with like a domestic space,
Yeah,
it
is. Yeah.
Seems almost invasive to walk into someone's living room.
I don't know. See,
we
don't think it is because we're very proud of what it is that we're doing. We're very proud of our home, and like and we're very open. I feel like that's something kind of which is interesting about museums and other institutions that are always having problems with saying like, well, how do we get people to come in? There's always this sort of like, they say that they're not very open with the public, or they're intimidating to the public in a way. And for us, it's like, well, this is our home, and by inviting you into our home, we're inviting you into our lifestyle. And so hopefully you're into that. There were a couple of people that got really offended by it, but I have no idea why.
Well, I mean, it seems like in a particular area, without any real pretext, for like you're speaking to Chicago having a very like common trend of doing these things, but in Dallas this is not an area that has really picked up on that or embraced it in a strong way. So the general response seems to be a little like, so this isn't a gallery. There aren't the certain expectations that would otherwise go along with I suppose entering into a domestic space to see an art show. And
there's something weird about I guess the public in general that has a distrust of art and artists, as if we're always trying to pull one over on them or something like that, you know. And like I said, when the people didn't like what we were doing at our house, I couldn't understand why, because there wasn't anything really offensive. There wasn't anything offensive, really. I mean, it was mostly abstract work, There's no nudity or anything like
directly.
That.
Yeah. I understand.
There wasn't like open pot smoking or anything
no real
like
breaking
that,
of cultural mores of any kind.
Yeah, but it was so intimidating to some people, and they just couldn't handle it sometimes. So for us, we want to like interact with people on that level,
And
it's okay.
it seems to encourage a sort of what would you say, like a evolution of a mentality, you know, just allow to, like, you know, this idea to spread rather than trying to capitalize on something, do
Or
something
fight it, really.
quote unquote new, but rather just like do something and go, why doesn't everyone just do this? It's not like we're necessarily attempting to profiteer off of like the creation of a new market, but rather like change the market as it exists. Maybe
it would be nice to profit off of it.
I mean, that's most certainly a hope, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, Lord knows we could need it or use it. But you know, anyway, I want to end on that note. I'm excited.
Sure.
I'm excited that you got to be on the show tonight. Excited that you know, you're doing these things. I really look forward to the future to see what really pans out with this. I hope that we keep the momentum. Power to you.
Thank you.
It's really a pleasure to have you on the show. So thank you for joining us.
You too. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next week. Thank you for tuning in. Tonight, our musical performance will be by Billy Bones, performing My Jesus Turns Water into Whiskey. Enjoy.
My Lord is tried and true, for He's the host of the heavenly party for me and for you. Ready, willing, can and able. And come Sunday, oh, crackers and juice you right under the table. 'Cause my Jesus turns water into whiskey. We don't want no more wine, that just takes too much time. I just lean my head back until it hits me. I'm just a searching to find me a Lord to call mine. Sweet Jesus, hear my prayer. Well, don't miss me, just drown me in whiskey till I need to come up for air. Well, my soul He aimed to cleanse. Well, that day that God sighed and Jesus